Well, hello and welcome. I am Brian M. Truskowski with Illuminate. This is the Illuminated Conversations podcast. This is Trice Berlinski, and we're going to be having a wonderful conversation here in this wonderful sound booth. So this conversation, season 3, is all about health, alternative ways of looking at health in this wild and crazy world we're in post-COVID. And Trice does mindfulness meditation and stuff like this. And so she's gonna be talking about that, maybe heart math, I think you said you do as well, right? And so she's gonna be bringing to the table, literally, some different concepts of how you can get to maybe more mental, spiritual, emotional health from that perspective of mindfulness and meditation. So Trice, go ahead and tell people what's your background? What's your history? Why should we care about what you have to say? And like being the authority on what you do. So
yeah, definitely. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, absolutely.
It's fun. So my business is called Presence to Pupils, and I just literally had a calling one day to teach mindfulness to kids in schools. And I didn't even really know what exactly that word meant or anything like that. So I just did some research, ended up finding that it was being taught out in California, and ended up getting my first training and weekend, basically a seminar for mindfulness and education at Omega Institute in New York. And the training was by it's called Mind Up is the curriculum, and it's actually by Goldie Hawn, which probably most of you know. And so that was in 2011. And I met women who I joined up with. We started a nonprofit for mindfulness and education, became trained by several different people in mindfulness-based substance abuse treatment, learn how to breathe, mindful schools, mindfulness in schools out of the UK, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then also became certified as a meditation instructor through the University of Holistic Theology, and more recently trained by Dr. Joe Dispenza in the neuroscience of change, because I've always liked integrating science into the meditation and mindfulness practices, because as we all know, the history of these things comes from Eastern religions, right? Or even Eastern cultures. So, India and Tibet and things like that. So there's a lot of people in our society who are inhibited, who are fearful perhaps of meditation or mindfulness, thinking that I'm literally trying to change their religion, when in fact, I'm just trying to give tools. And that's what I do best, is basically break down the information so that people can access, understand, begin to practice, and have greater awareness and become empowered in their lives. One of my favorite words.
And the theology is the studying of the Eastern philosophies that you mentioned then, or?
It's called what did I call it now? University of Holistic Theology. I only studied meditation. I am not an expert in other theologies at all.
Okay.
Have some awareness, of course, but yeah, that was simply to become certified as a meditation instructor. And so I think what makes me more of an expert than any of that training is the fact that I've worked with kids from Detroit schools all the way to the Upper Peninsula, inner city of Flint.
Oh, wow.
Even Catholic schools. So literally integrating these lessons through the Bible, and an example would be love your neighbor as yourself. Like, we hear that when we go to church or when people go to church, but how? And so meditation, mindfulness teaches us how to, perhaps I'm really angry at my neighbor. Perhaps something happened that was really bad. I don't even want to think about the examples because I don't like to throw those things out there. But, then how do I manage those emotions and continue to love my neighbor?
Right.
And that's what it teaches.
Well, they say, those who cast the first stone, right? It's just like from the Bible. It's like, how can you see the fleck in your neighbor's eye when you don't see the plank in your own? I mean, this is the Bible stuff. So do the inner work, right?
Exactly. And so mindfulness meditation is present moment awareness without judgment. And so it means literally not judging yourself too.
Wow. I mean, that's so hard for some people to not even judge others.
Yeah.
Right. Because that's the first, but again, from the Bible, judge not, least you be judged. Right. Let God do that. That's not our job to do. So how hard is that? I mean, that's what the whole point, what you're saying is to drop back and go, okay, how am I in this? Right.
And as we practice, though, not judging ourselves, it makes it easier, literally, to not judge others.
Yeah.
And so it's that, and the opposite of judgment is curiosity. So it's this constant coming back to being curious instead of judging and loving. Loving kindness is a big part of meditation, mindfulness meditation, and also the heart math that you talked about.
That's beautiful. So my friend and mentor Steve, who will be a guest on the show in time, says, if you're fully present, you're only coming from a place of love and curiosity, right?
Beautiful.
That's full presence.
Yeah.
Anything other than that, you're not fully present,
Right?
Because whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So what does that look like then? So you guide people and children. Is your main population kids then, or do you work with adults?
I work with everybody.
Okay.
So, I mean, I've worked with sports teams like University of Michigan women's softball team, Girl Scout clubs. I've led young men, people who are struggling through grief, people in Flint who the objective was to help them because they had someone in the family incarcerated. And in essence, what happened is they were more upset about the water crisis. So it's been all over the board. More recently, I'm working with people on a love-based donation basis, which means that people pay what and when they can. And my passion behind that is because I know that there's, especially youth, it could be anyone, and we're all connected. So even if I'm working with the adults, the parents, it's still affecting the children. And so, but there's such a wait list. There's this epidemic of mental health crisis for youth right now, adolescents, and a lot of them can't get in.
And then that's tragic. And I was talking with a friend the other day, and who has kids, who's a pediatrician, Megan, right?
Yeah,
and she was saying, when her and I were talking, it's like, well, you and I as adults can do all this inner work, but what if we roll the clock back and do this work when we're kids?
Right.
That would just circumvent and solve the whole thing going forward. Right. And I even saw in the news the other day, like, yeah, there's an epidemic of this happening, mental health of kids. My perspective, I'm curious for your response, is I think with the spiritual awakening, the ascension they're having right now, kids are waking up and having ascension symptoms or awakening symptoms, which, according to the DSM, is considered psychosis or being neurotic, hearing voices in your head, seeing things, right? So we're going to throw you in mental health, when in reality they're having a spiritual awakening.
Right.
I mean, what's your thought on that?
Yeah, I've seen that. Was it last year? No, I think it was. Maybe it was 2 years ago. I can't remember. No, it was last year actually. I went on a trip to North Carolina, and I was in a house with my friend and her husband and all their sons, and all these young men. And it was profound, mind blowing, the interest that they had. I mean, when I started this work in 2011, people were against it, from a religious perspective. Men and boys had no interest. And it's just all of that is changing, and they're accessing like literally what you're talking about, and they're trying to understand it through neuroscience and meditation instead of just being diagnosed with something, like you said.
And that's what Joe Dispenza gets into, is the science of it.
Oh,
right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think people need that, like the heart math.
Right.
I hate to say, like, this country is still very puritanical in its roots. And even though we're all like growing, mentally and education wise, people still want the science behind things. And people like me who just know, but then, I think a large part of the population is like, well, teach me the science on this because it's not true elsewise. So I love that Joe Dispenza is doing that work, and Greg Braden and people like this are doing doing the hard work to do the science, because we need to.
And what's interesting is that, I have some scientists in my family, and they've said, well, it's, it's not scientific, certain things. And then I don't remember where I read it, but it was that basically we are our own laboratory. I mean, there's no truth like the truth that you experience, and that's always wonderful too. When I do my work, there's no really set method. It's really tuning into where people are in the present moment and being able to work with them through whatever's happening. So you can't just, the curriculum is fine, but you have to be able to, or I have to be able to, when I work with them, to really feel like I'm doing a good job to access them where they're at, to even tune in. And sometimes it's not a thought process. It's not that logical. It's more the, through meditation, just quieting the mind. And it's literally like a miracle, which ties us back into some of the religious concepts, when things come to us. And it's not a thought. It's not pursuing it by analyzing it. It's just being open. And then
emptying the cup and letting the information come in. Right. And that's the thing is that can either, I was talking with someone yesterday, Dr. Aaron, about the same idea, is we can either be with these new esoteric ideas, we can either be scared or like holy cow, I want to get into that, right? And there's a strong bifurcation of black and white, right? And not a lot of gray area in that, because it either, like you said, challenges religious beliefs, or they're just not ready for it, right? Because it challenges their own personal beliefs. I think especially with getting into meditation and hearing these intuitive thoughts, what I've seen is sometimes it reveals things to people that are either not ready for, or they don't want to hear. So then they shove it back down and they run from it.
Right. A lot of people are living in a state of fear and a state of survival, and it's either from things from their past, or it's from what's going on in society nowadays with all the discontent and
these things are wonderful for
that's what
that,
I was
right? I
just
can
gonna
be
say.
addicted to this thing 24/7, not have to look up, and at the same
Mhm.
time I can ignore everything, right?
Yeah.
And so absolutely, it's that, right? So
And
these are convenient, they're everywhere.
and that's literally like, in the past, if you had something chasing you, and you were really threatened, your life was actually threatened. With all of that information constantly coming at us, or the social media or the text, it's literally like something after you all the time, just that slow drip.
Well, it's the endorphin rush that you get out of the message, the email, it's all the social media has been driven
Right.
to build that,
Right.
The addiction,
Yeah,
100% addiction. And I saw this meme one time, and it said, if you want to understand addiction, recognize that every time you pick up your phone is the same thing as an addict wanting to pick up their substance.
Mhm.
And that hit me, boom. I'm like, oh my God, like that makes perfect sense.
And even beyond that, I mean, that's a piece of it, but then think too about everything that happens in your life that's a challenge for you, every problem or habit that you can't quite overcome. What internal addictive state is going on inside of you that you're basically nurturing? Not you, but people in general that we're nurturing, and we can't overcome something that we actually have the power to overcome, because we don't realize that we're driving those chemicals inside of our body. Like if you have trouble being on time, which is a struggle I've dealt with throughout my life, realizing that I'm addicted to that adrenaline. And so then when I start to run late, to not allow myself to get that thrill from the adrenaline, if that makes sense.
Interesting. I haven't heard that angle. I've heard other angles, but that's an interesting one.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
So my question to you
Yeah.
is, for those listening, this is wonderful philosophy,
Mhm.
but practically, is this something, I know those who do the inner work, it's often better be done in groups or with a therapist or a mental health person. But even that is sort of like mental health may throw you too far into the academic world. And so my question to you is what do you think people need an adjunct to that, not just doing it on their own? Because if they get caught in a spiral or a wormhole or a rabbit hole of their own stuff, they need someone professional to hold space for them.
Right. So are you asking if someone's meditating on their own, do they, or any of
Yeah,
those
as they're opening up
things?
this door of awareness, as you're teaching them mindfulness and meditation, and like all of a sudden these messages are coming through that maybe they didn't know they were abused as a child, or this whatever, it's coming through the awareness of this job isn't meant for you, this person isn't meant for you, and how to deal with that dissonant energy, whatever is coming through.
Yes.
So I have my own, but I'm curious what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah. And so I've had clients I work with people one-on-one as well. And even though I'm not a certified therapist, I basically like a life coach, right? Through teaching them meditation and mindfulness, and have clients who have been victims of abuse and have PTSD and trauma. And so it's very much needed to guide them, because for example, one particular person was doing body scans and doing them very well, which is like a meditation for the audience, if you don't know, where instead of focusing on the breath, like people do in a meditation, it's picturing each part of the body and really turning that attention, that curiosity towards what's my head feel like right now. And, small little things like, can I feel my hair against my cheek? Like continuing down and even on the inside of the body. So, as you can imagine, if someone suffered from physical abuse, that kind of attention can bring the PTSD to a high level of awareness and put them right into a stress mode as if it's happening right now. And so, while they were doing a good thing, to guide them into other tools and skills that they can use so that they're not going to literally keep themselves stuck, right? Because sometimes we think, oh, well, this is a good thing, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that sort of brings up this misconception that spiritual awakening or all this mindful stuff is like all, the Instagram lifestyle. Look at me, I'm meditating with my crystals and things and blah, blah, blah. But in reality, it's like, no, you're pulling back the veil on a lot of stuff, right? And so it's not always easy, and it's funny, there's this meme I have, it's a 9-part thing. Maybe I'll drop it in just as a frame here so people can look at it. But it's a 9-part frame of like all the different feels, right, that we go through, like, oh, this is bliss, get off my lawn, life is perfect, right? This is like, they're after us, they're watching us, like all of it, right, that comes with the spiritual awakening sort of thing. So yeah, it's that, because I definitely know people, similar thing, they could be in a yoga class. It's happened to me. I've been in a yoga class doing stuff, and all of a sudden I'm going through a rebirthing experience.
Right.
And luckily I had the resources to be able to manage that, but most people wouldn't.
Yeah. And does your audience know what a rebirthing process is?
Right.
Experience.
Yeah. I mean, and I talked about it briefly, but in short, it's from that meditative standpoint, like when you're getting information like intuition, it's like I'm literally going into a dream state and a meditation state where I'm being rebirthed as a human in a meditative state. And it's really fascinating. But fortunately, I've gone through it many times as a bodywork practitioner. I've been facilitated through those, so it helped me first to have all this other facilitating people do it for me. They give me the tools to go, oh, okay, I can manage it when it shows up, right? It's still kind of weird and scary. And like I said, the conversations here may be sort of weird and far out, maybe triggering you. Maybe you don't agree with us and you don't have to. But either way, these are conversations to like expand your mind, go home and think about them, talk about them with friends, or especially what we're talking about right now, right? Rebirthing experiences, all these things. So we're not here to convert or change people. We're just here to like, hey, here's a radically different way of thinking about things, right? And I've been doing this for a long time, over 10 years. So, I mean, for me, it's just like, oh yeah, everyday conversation.
Yeah, right. For
So,
some people, it's not.
Right, exactly. And so that's part of why I was having these conversations, is to broaden. So thank you for going into that. But again, that same thing is being able to find, like, a friend of mine going through therapy has a trained mental health therapist who also does like shamanic work, meaning like she's open to the esoteric and the energetic realms as well. So I think it's a beautiful merging if we can get more of that, like life coaching. I think as a life coach myself, it's just like, we're not giving answers to people. I'm personally asking questions to get them to their own solutions, right? And I think just having that safe container to be inside of sometimes is all we need.
And creating space. I mean, essentially what meditation does is a similar thing between a therapist and their client. There's space. So you might be overwhelmed, or a client might be overwhelmed with all the problems in their life, and it's so close and they can't see through all of the chaos basically. But a therapist sits back and starts to gather the story and the pieces. Well, in meditation, we, as you know, literally sit back and become the observers of ourselves. And so instead of being caught up in the drama, it's like we're in a movie theater and we're watching it on the screen, but we're not so immersed. So then we can see the patterns. And then that present moment awareness allows for answers to come in that are not based on our past. Because so often, I think if there's a point to make to the audience in terms of connecting to these beliefs, we can't solve our problems from what we know from the past that have led us to the problems that we're having. And so by staying open, new information comes in. And again, not through analysis. And that's an experience that until you have it, you don't realize how accessible it is.
Right. I mean, the past can inform, but it's not going to have the answers necessarily.
Right.
Right.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
And that's wisdom too, when you can look back at it and learn from it.
Right. Exactly. And for those that may be more spiritually religious based, we could say, it's God or the Holy Spirit coming through to help inform us and guide us on our path. And I think it's I mean, maybe trigger, but it's semantics. It's divine. It's our higher selves. It's God. It's coming through to inform.
Yeah. And if people, when I talk to, people in groups and I'm doing a training or even one-on-one, I say, whether it's God or the universe, it's an energy. And that's where some of the information I learned from Dispenza, I just love, because he explains that everything is information and energy. And, we literally create an electromagnetic field around our bodies that is measurable based on our thoughts and our feelings. And when I was a little girl, it used to be power of positive thinking was the trend. And then we realized more as neuroscience and other sciences have evolved, that we can literally choose our feelings. And it's like, you don't, like you said about repress earlier, if you feel grief, you can't repress it and just say, well, I'm going to feel joy. You need to go through that process, right? But by going through that process, it allows that energy hold that might have you, whether it's physical, like even asthma. I was talking to someone with asthma recently, or emotional, like grief. When we restrict ourselves emotionally or physically, we're literally holding on to that which we want to get rid of. And so learning to relax, both on that emotional in our heart, right? Our minds even, or our guts.
Like you said, let go or be dragged, right?
Yeah.
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 It's like, and that's the thing is that sometimes it's like it shows up and we just want to, like, because it's familiar. And then there's the flip side of that. It's, letting go, and all of a sudden this thing we've been holding on to for 10, 20, 30, 40, whatever years is gone. And there's this weird void and it feels uncomfortable.
Mhm.
But as they say, just because it's different doesn't mean it's bad. Right. If
Right.
there's like, oh, that's gone. And then from that point, okay, how do I want to feel about this?
Exactly.
Right. And
Exactly.
we get to choose. And actually, I was joking about on the introductory video. And if you haven't seen it, click the link up here and I'll take you to that. But it's this like, me and my friend were talking about, like, you get to choose your own emotions to a degree. I think you have the initial response, reaction, but then after that, you get to choose. But what if the initial reaction puts you on, the fear bus going that way out of town, but you're stuck on that bus until the bus comes to the stop? Then you can get off and get a transfer ticket in the other direction. But the last few weeks, I was in this place of like depression and I could see all the tools. I'm like, I know it's out there, but I couldn't I was stuck. I couldn't get out off the bus.
Right.
And it was like this weird spot. But eventually a point came like, oh, I'm getting off this crazy thing. Right. And I was able to, but
how did you do it?
Many, many hours and many, many miles of walking in the woods and conversations with a few friends. And I had one friend that just kind of went, this is what you're doing. And all of a sudden, because God bless him, right? But just like sometimes we need those friends to just give us the like slap on the face, like stop.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
Because we can't ourselves. We're just so caught in that fear spiral, whatever it is, depression, anxiety, stress, whatever.
Right.
And the silly thing was, I was watching myself do it. I'm like, dude, there's the answer. I'm like, I know, but I'm going this way. I couldn't even talk myself out of it. Right.
Yeah. I think we've all experienced that, which is why these practices are so important, because the more you do them, the more accessible they are, so that when you really need them, you can pull it in, And so one of the things I learned in my training is that initial emotion lasts 60 to 90 seconds. And so if we don't ruminate, the actual feeling goes away.
Yep. That's the truth of it, I think, is that it's people, I'm guilty of it.
Me too.
Right.
Me too.
Oh, how does it feel again? Oh, wait, what about now? It's and then circling back
and then
in.
what if,
all of it.
Right. All the thoughts have to feed the emotion.
And then, even like with me, with my knee, we're talking about flow and ease, and like, injured my knee, and I keep going to these meditations, like, oh, it's healed now. And I wake up, I'm like, are you sure? I don't believe it. And it's just like, well, no, it ain't going to be healed now because you went back into it.
Right. Right. And that's one of the things. So basically, like the Dispenza training talks about positive thought and positive, that's not just positive thinking, it's positive feeling. Right. But then through the work I've done with Christian-led meditations, I've done this mathematical equation where, and it could be universe too, but so it's a positive thought and a positive emotion gives one. Now, if you have a positive thought, like, oh, I want my knee to feel better, but I don't believe it, so that's a negative. So now you've got a 0. So if you have two positives and you literally get out of bed, get up from your meditation, believing it's true to the point where you're giving gratitude that it's true, now you've given a multiplier to that 1 + 1. And I say gratitude is the n multiplier, it's infinite. And so you literally start to create that field around you where it becomes your reality. Okay. But the moment you stop believing that, and that's faith, it's like literally a mathematical equation for faith. The minute you stop believing it and go, where's that pain I'm so used to feeling?
Right.
Right.
And that's what I'm saying. Like, I've been doing this a long time. I teach this stuff, and I just want people to know it's not like a one and done sort of thing. It's just like I get caught into these things, right? How many times it's like, oh, we get the answer, but oh, wait, no, that can't be true. It's too easy. That's the biggest one. it's too easy. It's too easy of an answer. Like how many, I've gotten so many answers. I'm like, no way. That's too easy. A lot of times it is easy,
Yeah.
but we don't want it to be easy. We have this proclivity to want to make it hard.
Yep.
Right. And so going back to the thing that you just said, something that I want people to hear is there's a growing awareness, especially like in the new age community, around toxic positivity. So what are your thoughts on that, given what you just said?
Well, can you tell me what you define toxic positivity as?
Yeah, good. Thank you. Toxic positivity, in my definition, is almost like bypassing something that's horrible that's going on in your life and trying to paint it, whitewash it with positivity and love and light and rainbows and unicorns, when in reality, like, no, there's something horrible happening right now, right? I mean, case example, I think this is the perfect one where I've seen this happen in workshops. Someone has a loved one die, and they're in the middle of the grieving process. Maybe they're at the beginning of the grieving process, and someone comes like, well, you know, they're always with you and they're just with you in spirit in a different form. It's like, that's true, but they have to go through the grief first.
Right, exactly. And you just said it right there. I mean, it is toxic to dismiss that. It's toxic not just socially and physically. If you weren't,
I mean, it's a form of abuse. Almost.
It almost is.
Right.
Absolutely, because we need to feel. It's like, okay, so one of my favorite analogies is it's a garden. And if you have this garden and you're like, you go out to the yard and you're like, I'm going to plant my garden there. But you don't sit with those, you know, you don't take time to look at it and see where the weeds are and where the rocks are that you have to, where you have to pull and where you have to till the soil. You can't just go in and plant, right? And it's that process. And what we resist persists. So if a person were to resist depression or grief, and they all have their own timeline. I mean, I know I said 60, 90 seconds, but depression and grief have a stronger hold on us than a thought like, oh, I can't believe they cut me off in traffic and I'm irritated.
Yeah, no, that's completely different. You know, that's way different.
So,
yeah. And the other thing is, I want to say this quote and I want to start maybe wrapping up the conversation. Sure. But of all people, Jim Carrey has this beautiful quote, which says, depression is your avatar telling you it's tired of playing the game you're trying to play. And I know that's true. So every time I see depression coming up in me, it's like, okay, where am I fighting? Where am I banging my head against the wall? Where am I paddling upstream in my life? Right. That I'm trying to pretend it's not there. And he said, just sinking into it. And I remember a number of years ago, how this played out in real life for me was one of my cats died very unexpectedly. And being in the more new age community, I was going into meditation and mantra and all these things to try to like spiritually bypass the experience away. And it didn't get me anywhere. And maybe a week or so, maybe 2 weeks after my cat passed, I'm on a walk and I'm like praying for answers. And I hear surrender. I'm like, what do you mean surrender? They go, let the wave consume you. Let it kill you. I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, you need me to be, and it's like, if you want to get out, you got to go through it. Yeah. Stop trying to stop the wave. For sure. And so I went home and I was living with a partner at the time, and she was in session with a client at the house. She came out and she's like, wow, what happened to you? I'm like, I surrendered. I allowed this grief to consume me, to pull me under and drown me. But it wasn't through that I could get out of it. And the next day I was significantly better. Yeah. But I had to go into that because I tried for weeks to bypass it. Right. So sometimes we need to let that, because there's lessons in there. Like you said, if you're using the gardening soil, there's fruit in the loam, right? In the death rebirth of all that. It's
like embracing, like I think of myself as a little child and taking a gift. Someone put it, wrapped a gift for me. It was, a really weird shape, and that curiosity. And I did that with depression, exactly what you just said. I had to remember, first of all, to embrace it. But then once I did and took it like, that gift, like turning it around, shaking it, listening to it, like really, really seeing it as a gift and really being curious and being with it, letting it take you under. It passed. I mean, I dealt with it for years and years and years and tried therapy and talking to friends and family and exercise and sunlight and vitamin D. And, it was really through the process of emotionally allowing, surrendering.
And that's the thing, is most people have fear. I had fear, right? You want me to go deeper into this?
For sure.
It's like, heck no. Yeah. Right?
Push that away.
Yeah, absolutely. So this has been a lovely conversation. I think we're kind of coming up on the half-hour mark, but how can, so closing, I'll give you time for closing thoughts, and then if people want to get a hold of you, we'll put all your information in the
Sure.
description below, but just share a little bit more, maybe wrap this up, and then how can people get a hold of you? And also talk about your workshops that you do too.
Yeah, so this summer at a place called Nature, a Michigan Retreat in June, June 22nd through 25th. There is a workshop based on Joe Dispenza's work with myself and another colleague, Change Your Mind, Create New Results. And my website shows that information at triceberlinski.com. Also, you can find my phone number and contact information there. So I do workshops locally. I work with people one-on-one. And I think in terms of closing thoughts, just, surrender is really, we said we were going to talk about flow, but I think surrender is sort of where we ended up. And
well, flow leads to surrender. It's the other side of the coin.
And that no matter what you're going through, and it's so hard to imagine, but there are skills we have. There's so much more that we have access to, so much more power. And it's just really accepting that truth and knowing that we're worthy to be able to easily, like you said, that's too easy, but we can that easily change things in our lives.
Well, going back to what we talked about the eagles in the beginning of our conversation, not here, but offline, was we live our whole lives in chains and we never even knew we had the key.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. The eagle song.
Yeah. And I'll put an image up here. I took a picture in Sedona. There's this beautiful piece of art where there's this cage sphere, and sitting on the top is a human with his legs in the hole, and he's sitting on top. And I put a quote on that, and because it's so profound, right? It's like we're living in that thing, but we hold the key to get out.
Absolutely.
That's beautiful. So so thank you for being on this, and thank you for the conversation.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and as always, if you got to this point in the show, thank you. And if you want to share it. If you want to have a conversation, leave comments below. And what did you get out of this? What was something that was powerful and potent for you in that? And let us know. I'd love to hear that. And thank you all for watching. Thank you for listening. Have a beautiful, blessed day, and we'll see you on the next one. See ya.